Alright guys, real quick before we get started, just wanted to go over the tools that we kind of would suggest to have, and that would be either a track saw or a skill saw. If you're using a skill saw, you'll want like a level or something, some kind of straight edge. Planer, drill set, drive set. You'll need a scribe tool, shims, tape, only if you're working with a pre-finished bench. That way you don't mar up the surface too much. And you may or may not end up using subfloor, depending on whether or not you have studs or backing in your wall. You'll need a level, of course, and the sander for the scribes.
Hi, Matt again from SCC, and today I want to show you how to install a bench. So first, I want to establish a height. The height at the top of the bench is 20 inches. So the thickness of the bench is a piece of plywood which is 3/4, so I have established a height of 19 1/4 inch. Next, I want to take my level and I want to level a line. I've already marked out the studs, so once I have that line established, you can then use this good subfloor for an additional adhesion. So now the lines are established. We already have our cleats that are pre-cut. So I'm going to want to put a little glue behind here, not enough so it's going to ooze out. And then at this location where the studs are, I'm going to install a 3-inch GRK screw. I'm going to apply the cleats, but before I do so, I want to apply this construction adhesive behind where the cleats are going. So next, I want to, before I screw it, I want to put a quick nail that helps lock it in place, but the screw is actually what gives the real strength. And it helps to rub the glue back and forth.
Hey guys, real quick, just want to explain fastener selection as far as which fasteners to use where whenever you're doing any kind of finished carpentry. For instance, this first one here is a 2 3/8 trim head. You're typically going to use this wherever you want minimal visual after the fact when it's done. So you can see how small the head is on that. It's pretty small. And then we got these 1.5 inch trim heads. These are going to be great applications. For instance, on this left side over here, we have this support going into the cabinet, but we don't want it to go through the inside of the cabinet, so we got these 1.5 inch screws for that. And then we got typical GRK 3-inch for going into our stud locations on the wall. And that's, you definitely want to plan it out ahead before you start on a project like this, just so you have the right fasteners for doing the job.
Okay, so real quick now, I have an 1/8 inch drill bit. I want to pre-drill wherever I'm putting the screw, and I'll put in the screws.
Alright guys, so all the supports are on, and now what we've done is we've gone ahead and drawn a line here, and this represents our depth from, this isn't our final depth, but this is a line that will be parallel to this line. So think of these two lines. If we look at the floor, they're in plane with each other. And the reason why we do that is so that when we set in our top to scribe it, we'll align the top edge, front face of the top, with there and with here. And what that'll do is it'll keep the scribe in plane from the front face of the cabinet here. Essentially, it'll keep this plane correctly going across, so that when we scribe our sides and then we scribe our back, it'll sit nicely and it'll be tight and there won't be any gaps.
Okay, now the next step is to establish your front dimension. You pull a measurement, and I have 47¼ inches. So now on this top, I'm going to make 2 marks.
So typically your bench tops come in oversized. In this case, it came in oversized by about an inch. So therefore Matt made a mark a 1/2 inch in from one end. And then he added his finished dimension, which was 47¼ So a 1/2 inch plus your 47¼ He made his second mark then at 47¾ This allows for about roughly a 1/2 inch scribe on each side of the board.
Now the next step is to establish that this is level, it's on our lines. Now that I'm level on my lines, I'll put my scribe tool right on the mark. And all I do is follow a wall. We have the tape here so that it shows a nice clean line, especially when the top is pre-finished, painted or stained. You won't be marking where you're not supposed to. That's the right side. We just got done with the right side. Now we have the left side. So I lined up my right side mark, lined up my left side mark, take my level to make sure it reads level. And when we know that, we set our scribe tool to that pencil mark and we follow the cabinet. So now we have both sides fit. The next step is to go over to the sawhorses and use the tools at the beginning of the video to make these cuts. Of course, when we were showing you how to fit the top to the wall, the top was longer, so it was at an angle. I wasn't able to draw this face. So now I'm going to use my speed square, line up to the mark, and I'll just draw a simple mark down. Okay, so now we're going to use this tool called a track saw. It rides in this track. It's really nice. You push this top button and it cuts when you pull the trigger. But first what I want to do is I want to cut, because this is 0 degrees. I want to cut the first 5-6 inches at 0 degrees, cut through this whole thing. And then once I get back like 6 inches, the rest of it, I'm going to tip it like 10 degrees. That way when I get to scribing it, I'm not at 0 degrees. At 10 degrees, you're able to use your belt sander and take off just the top part versus the whole thing. Now I'm changing it to 10 degrees. I'm going to adjust my track saw. I'm not going to go exactly to the line. I'm going to go a little bit outside the line.
Walls are not always straight, so therefore the track saw is not always the best tool to use. We like to usually use a track saw to get close to the line and then finish it up with a belt sander.
And as you can see, we have line left over that I'll now use my belt sander and take off. I'm going to actually take off a little bit more of this back because it's excessive. That's more reasonable for a belt sander. So here I have a belt sander. It's a 3" by 21" belt. It's a really coarse belt. If you push it too hard, it's going to take a lot of material off. So you got to be kind of gingerly when you're actually scribing. Another option is a planer, but I found out over the years that I'm able to use a belt sander more precise.
One thing to note real quick here, when Matt's using this sander to scribe this board, he is holding that sander at probably like a 5-degree bevel. So he previously cut it with a 10-degree saw, and now he's using about a 5-degree bevel, so he's not having to take off as much material to get to the line.
Now after we've scribed our sides, we're able to drop this top in. It fits pretty good.
Alright, so right here Matt's going ahead and finding the biggest gap between the wall and the bench, and he's setting his scribe tool to be slightly wider than that so that it completely eliminates that gap. And now that we have that back wall scribed onto the bench, Matt's going to go ahead and track saw off a majority of it and then finish it up with the belt sander here. One thing to note real quick, you'll know notice he had it at a 10-degree bevel. What that does is the rock is going straight up and down here, and basically you want the top edge to hit before the bottom edge will ever hit, and it makes it easier to run the belt sander to make sure that you hit that line and you're not going through as much material here as if you were to cut the line at a straight 90-degree down. You'd have to take off a lot more material to get to your scribe line.
One thing you'll notice when I'm operating this belt sander, I always have my hand right next to when I'm applying pressure down. The reason is, I'll call it bed hopping, whatever you want to call it, but if you don't have your hand right next to it and you're operating the belt sander, these can bounce up and down. So it just helps put pressure down and do an easier scribe.
And another thing is when you're doing this back or even the side where you put these bevels on, I wouldn't go more than 10 degrees, but it all depends on the size of your support. So for instance, we got a 3/4 support. If you go like, say you went like a 45-degree back here, you wouldn't be on any of the support hardly at all. So you want to keep this roughly at about 10 degrees.
So after looking at my scribe, it looks really good on the right side, in the back. On this left side, as you can see, there's a slight hairline gap, and for most people, you put a dark stain, you never see it. But I want to try to come from the inside of the cabinet. I'll remove this top, I'll pre-drill a hole, and then I'll be able to come with a screw, and that should suck that up.
Real quick, since this is a finished cabinet, we went ahead and countersunk the holes on those 2 screw spots, just so that they end up being flush or even slightly under flush. That way you can put what they call a fast cap over the top of them. Basically, it's like a cover that will be the same finish as the cabinet itself.
So I don't want nail holes through the top, so I'm going to use some wood glue. Just squirt it on the top of the cleat all the way around.
Yeah, so right here Matt's going ahead and pre-drilling these screws before he puts them in, because it's going into oak and you don't want it to split. So after putting those screws in, now you can see the difference, nice and tight there. And it doesn't seem to affect the other side because it's scribed to the right width the rest of the way. Now obviously if you had a gap that ran along this whole entire edge, and you tried to do that, what would end up happening is you'd end up pulling this whole bench over, and you would end up with that same gap on the right hand side. So that trick only works if a majority of it is already scribed and tight. Just want to say thanks for watching the video, and please subscribe if you're interested in seeing more content like this.